Anytime now, we are expecting an indictment, maybe, to come down from New York prosecutors against a former president's family business. That's something I never thought I'd say in my life, but here we are, in post-Donald Trump's America. NBC News reported last week that charges against the Trump Organization are expected as soon as this week, and prosecutors looking into possible tax issues over perks for Trump Organization executives. According to the New York Times, Trump's lawyers met with prosecutors Monday night in a last-ditch effort to avoid an indictment. The Trump team reportedly tried to talk them out of charges by laying out the harm an indictment would have on the Trump Organization, which I assume is the point here for prosecutors. So I'm not sure how well that argument is going to go over. That was all me being sarcastic. I hope that came through the camera. Joining me to talk about this week's developments is NBC News legal contributor Katie Phang, who's a very serious person, and this is a very serious topic, but I do derive some pleasure because I feel like accountability is important in life. So break down where things stand now as we essentially wait to see who might be indicted, who's on the list of possibles.
Yes, so Zerlina, we are all waiting with bated breath, and everybody's kind of complaining. They're like, is it just a tease? We heard Monday was, the drop dead deadline in terms of whether or not the Trump Organization lawyers could convince the prosecutors not to bring charges, but never fear, justice is near. And justice could look just as something as simple as an indictment naming one defendant, and that defendant could just be the Trump Organization. And a lot of people keep on asking, how can you indict a company? It's a company. And you're right, it's a company. But, a company is run by humanoids. A car doesn't just drive itself, although I think 21st century technology kind of has gotten us there. But it's the people that are using the company or the corporate entity to further criminal goals. And who do we know that has been at the helm of that ship? And that's been Donald Trump himself. It's been his children, some of whom we know are not the brightest bulbs in the batch. And we also know it involves people like the CFO, longtime CFO, Alan Weisselberg. And so the reason why I say justice is near is it is not a coincidence that there has been leaked that an indictment is soon to be had. And there are some very smart people that have put their brains together at the United States Attorney's Office, Southern District of New York, as well as the New York Attorney General's office, Letitia James. There's some really smart people, and they're not going to be a tease. They're not going to sit there and say that an indictment is near and no indictment comes out of that. And so I know that we could be looking at anything, as you just announced, could run the gamut from insurance fraud, tax fraud, real estate fraud, you name it. And it's the books. It's the corporate books and records for the business that really holds the key to the truth. So if I were somebody like Alan Weisselberg, I know that, he's quote unquote not flipping. I'd say he's not flipping now. It doesn't mean he's never going to flip.
It also doesn't mean that he's not going to be indicted and charged, right? I mean, it's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, that they can still charge Alan Weisselberg tomorrow if they want, potentially, and then he may be more persuaded to flip then, and he could still do that then, right?
You're absolutely right. And so that's why I'm saying the indictment could be something as simple as just the Trump Organization now. But it doesn't mean that something called a superseding indictment, which is a subsequent indictment, could come out that could name Alan Weisselberg. It could name any other people that are Trump executives, including some of the Trump family members and maybe eventually Donald Trump himself. The reason Alan Weisselberg has been so critically looked at and why everybody says he's such a huge part of the prosecution is he's been with the Trump family for literally decades. And some of the perks and benefits that may have not been booked properly by the company, to which his family members and him himself have been the recipient or the beneficiary, that prosecutors are looking at. They think Alan Weisselberg is literally the key to read and interpret the legend that would explain all of the Trump transactions. And we know from people like Michael Cohen, yeah, that's probably the case. However, again, I would never underestimate what I have always fondly called the biggest law firm in the world, and that is the United States government. The resources, the manpower, the financial, ability to be able to bankroll this. And that's kind of the key thing here too, right, Zerlina? If you think about all the criming that's been done by Trump and the family, there's a fund, there's a source of money that's been bankrolling that crime. That's been the Trump Organization. And if you kneecap that bankrolling, where are you going to find the money to be able to buy those lawyers? Where are you going to find the money to be able to do all of that crime? And how are you going to be able to hide all of that crime if you were doing it through the auspices or the guise of the Trump Organization? So if you kind of kneecap that organization and you get it out of the way, I think you're going to see a lot of exposure and a lot of transparency that otherwise was being hidden before.
It's so important to understand all of that. And last question in the last minute, because we're almost out of time. So everybody's focused on Cy Vance and Tish James, obviously, because that's what was reported in the New York Times about coming indictments. But what else is out there in terms of criminal cases looking into the president or his associates that we should also know about?
Well, it's never ending. But, another thing that's really important is the fact that there is all the inauguration fraud that's been alleged in terms of misuse of funds. That also involves the Trump campaign, the Trump Organization, members of the Trump family. And, there's a lot of tentacles. The Georgia voter fraud that was going on in terms of them alleging the voter fraud that didn't happen, and his, attempts to extort and blackmail Georgia state officials to be able to change the outcome of the election. I mean, there's a lot that's going on that, like you just said, things percolate, right? Something comes up and then it goes back away, but we all know there's stuff going on behind the scenes.
Hi, I'm Zerlina Maxwell. Thanks for checking out our channel on YouTube. You can see more from Zerlina by clicking any of the videos on this screen, and make sure you subscribe below to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. Thanks for watching.